Hey, Minifish. It's the 16th of March, 2018. And something's come upon me this morning, and I gotta show it to you. We've been seeing Trump very heavily pushing going to Mars, going back to the moon. They recreated the Space Council with Pence and all these various things, right? Okay, that's all well and good. U.S. is going to Mars very soon. But at the same time, we got Russia just announcing, pretty much yesterday, he wants to beat the U.S. to Mars. Okay? This is pretty widespread, you know. Wants to go to Mars, find water on the moon. Trump is boasting about reaching Mars very soon. Okay? I want you to remember something, though. You have to, because the way these people think is the way they act. And you got to remember, Mars. Mars is and was and is the Roman god of war and bloodshed. Ruling planet of Aries. Okay? Aries in the time frame. And again, I don't follow astrology. I'm showing you what they go by. Aries runs between March 21st and April 19th. Mars rules in Aries. Mars means war and bloodshed. Trump is pushing for Mars. Putin is pushing for Mars. They both promise to beat each other to Mars, right? And then we see President Trump with his fist pumped in the air, representing the spear, his own coat of arms, okay, with a fighter with the 223 right on it. I don't think that's happenstance. They're taking us to war. And I think everybody already pretty much knows that, who's paying attention. But this really kind of like sums it up for me, really. Question is, when? Because they're not going to Mars. And I just hate doing this, but you need to listen to what this scientist at NASA tells you.
15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region.
That's just important for me to show you. That's a pretty new release from NASA. They can't go to outer space. Do you understand? They can't do it. This is all a bunch of theater and lies and deception to keep you from God. That's its primary purpose. But these men are just adhering to their flesh more or less. Okay? It's very tricky, very, sticky when you start, like, pointing fingers at people, judging them and whatnot. I'm just telling you that men are susceptible to the flesh, particularly men who are in very powerful positions, no matter how good, nice they are. They're going to war. And it doesn't matter why he believes he must go to war. And it doesn't matter why he believes he must go to war. But I'm telling you, they're working together. Because both of them know that you can't go to Mars. But Mars means war and bloodshed. So, you use your discernment and you decide who you're going to believe. As for me, the Word of God and the blood of Jesus Christ. That's my rock. I suggest you look into it for yourself if you haven't already. So I had to show this to you. I just have to. So keep an eye out. It's upon us, folks. Peace and grace to you. Many fish.
Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord, and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armour of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armour of God.
Hi guys, so as the tension between Russia and the UK ramp up, Theresa May is prepared to use nuclear weapons against Russia. This is something she said last year, but has kind of been reiterated again since the poisoning has happened over here in the UK, and Britain have expelled 23 Russian diplomats and have cut off high-level talks or high-level contacts with the Russian government. The PM has been taking a tough line against Vladimir Putin this week as Moscow and the UK clash over the poisoning of spy Sergei Skripal. Fears of war were raised as Russia warned Britain not to threaten a nuclear power, and military chiefs have warned there's a real risk of war sparked by Vladimir Putin. Britain's main nuclear weapons are the Trident missile-armed Vanguard submarines operated by the Royal Navy. Miss May has previously been very clear that she's prepared to use nuclear weapons if Britain enters into a war with Russia. That means even if it kills 100,000 innocent men, women and children. So the seriousness coming out of the UK government in response to Russia is reminiscent of the Cold War, except now we also have tensions in the Middle East between Iran and Israel, and also tensions on the Asian Peninsula with China, North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and America. And it seems as if things are really they're set, they're ready to go, they're set. And as I said in the last video, they're just waiting for the starting gun, so they can take off. And this comes as it's just recently been revealed that the Argentinian submarine that went missing was actually spying on the UK island of the Falklands when it vanished. So the Falklands was subject to an espionage plot by Argentina's government, with MPs admitting the submarine which went missing last November was spying on the British overseas territory when it vanished. And obviously Argentina has connections to Russia, and Russia are the ones who are kind of, getting all this military ready, getting all their missiles ready, issuing veiled threats like don't threaten a nuclear power and stuff like that. So it seems as if Russia is going to be the, the reason for this whole war to kick off. But that's not something that Vladimir Putin or Russia is unaware of. They are all part of the same globalist, elitist system, and each of them are just playing their roles. So as I say that, it just reminds me of the words like world stage, bad actor, off script. All of these phrases are in relation to acting, performing, distracting, whatever you like to call it. But when they say things like Donald Trump has gone off script, or we look bad on the world stage, or they're a bad actor, it just goes to show you that these things are planned. They're planned events, and these planned events have their actors who play their roles. And even when they're called a bad actor, that is their role. Their role is to be the bad actor, and to instigate things so that they have reasons to do things. So you can't very well start a world war without enemies. So you need to put across the illusion that you have enemies. North Korea, Russia, China, Venezuela, Syria, Iran, Iraq, all these countries, they each one plays their role, and it's the citizens who suffer, not the actual people at the top. This comes as North Korea has completed building its nuclear reactor, And that's obviously while they're saying that they're going to be having, peace talks with Donald Trump, and they're having summits with the South Koreans next month. So North Korea has completed the building of a nuclear reactor that could be used to produce deadly weapons. The secretive nation has been developing an experimental light water reactor at its nuclear facility in Yongbyon for several years. And of course, it's just come to completion in this year of 2018, where all these things look like they're reaching fever pitch and about to kind of boil over. And that only serves the next story, which is Russian nuclear subs quietly reached the US coast and left undetected. And in relation to the video I did yesterday with all the things that Russia are doing, it's quite well, it's not a surprise, it's quite a revelation to find that the Russian submarines have approached the US coast undetected, because that's something we've been talking about for the last couple of months. Russian submarines approaching the East Coast, and, um, after this tsunami, so it appears they already have approached the East Coast and left undetected, which means they have a route there, or even there could be some submarines that have been left behind, as the events are, as I see them, coming up soon. So the Russian nuclear-powered submarines conducted an exercise near American military bases with the objective of avoiding detection as they came close to the US coast, a submarine squadron commander told a Russian military TV channel. According to a submarine officer filmed in the show, the Navy command ordered to take position in the vicinity of US military bases during exercises. This mission has been accomplished. The submarine showed up in a set location in the ocean and returned to base. Asked if the submarines had managed to stay off the radar during the mission, he replied, "Yes, this is our objective, to come and go undetected." The Navy commander said the Russian vessels came close enough to American shores but did not violate US maritime borders, remaining in neutral waters. So the last report I had out of the American government was saying that they were aware of any vessels that approached the US coast, and that was in relation to the Russian spy ship that they've got sitting off the East Coast, gathering intelligence about the submarine bases and the naval installations that are along the East Coast. But if this report is correct, then it appears that they're not aware of all vessels that approach the coast, because they apparently weren't aware of this one. And I don't know if they were or if they weren't, but um, I think the focus of the story is that the Russian submarines approached the coast, and either they were undetected or they were allowed to do so. Either situation is alarming, because it would suggest that either the American government and its allies are not doing their job right in terms of discovering these things, detecting these things, and deterring these things, or it means that everyone's in league with each other, and these plans and it's planned, and they have allowed it to happen. So I'm not going to run through the whole scenario of how events can, unfold again, but just know that the Middle East is ready to explode. That will follow a situation in Europe, or sorry, that will precede a situation in Europe and on the Korean Peninsula. And when you think about those three expanses of land, that pretty much covers the entire planet. And obviously, the other people, the other countries that aren't making the headlines in the news in respect to the events that are going on, they are allied with countries that are in the news in respect to these events going on. So basically, everyone will be involved. This story is of particular interest, definitely because it's one of the scenarios we have been talking about. No one has said to us from the government that Russian submarines could potentially reach the East Coast and stuff like that. All of that analysis came out of the iPet Goat video, and now we're seeing particular stories that relate to some of the analysis that's been done on that particular video. So you guys, it's all here for you. It's all there. Just keep your eyes open, and know that we are in the timeline, and that any time from now, these kind of events that we've been talking about can happen. So with that, you guys have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and God
New
bless.
show of force from Russia's President Vladimir Putin announcing the development of what he calls an invincible missile. At his State of the Union speech, Putin touting the country's increased nuclear capabilities, unveiling a new intercontinental ballistic missile powered by a nuclear engine, which he claims renders defense systems useless. Putin, who's up for re-election, saying the new missile can deliver a nuclear attack anywhere in the world, adding the ICBM is powerful and modern, and defense systems will not be able to withstand it. Missile defenses will be useless against it. ABC News reporting the missile has been in development for several years and even tested twice last year as part of its nuclear modernization. But Putin's delivery was unnerving. He accused the West of, quote, ignoring us. Nobody listened to us. Well, listen to us now. NBC News reporting Putin insists he has no plans to be an aggressor, that Russia's strong military is a guarantor of peace on our planet. Yet, as some have pointed out, the animation appears to show the missile striking Florida. President Trump has expressed his desire to modernize the U.S.'s own nuclear capabilities, while engaging in saber-rattling with North Korea's leader over nuclear button size, indicating we could be in for a nuclear arms race once again.
Hi guys, if the war is to begin in the Middle East, then all the players are in their starting blocks and they're just waiting for the gun to go off. The Israeli Defense Forces on Thursday concluded 2 nationwide emergency preparedness exercises which tested both the General Staff's ability to manage a war and the Home Front Command's ability to protect the country's civilian population. The 2 annual exercises coincided with this month's Juniper Cobra air defense drill that the IDF holds every other year with the US military. A member of the IDF General Staff speaking on condition of anonymity told reporters that the exercises were particularly challenging as the army simulated a situation that was more difficult than how we assess the reality to be today. In addition to simulating extreme scenarios, the effort to manage 3 separate exercises simultaneously was also challenging for the military. He stressed the importance of the Juniper exercise, noting that it sent a message to the region, implying Iran that the United States is not just a theoretical ally, but is one that will fight alongside Israel if need be. The annual General Staff exercise, known as Keystone 2018, had the Army's top generals simulating a variety of challenges and threats on a number of fronts. A senior IDF officer told reporters on condition of anonymity. The generals were forced to deal with a number of scenarios, including the deaths of some 100 Israeli civilians in an attack, said the officer. We know the home front will be a target. In addition, they trained in how to respond if large-scale collateral damage is caused by an Israeli airstrike. Now, that part stood out to me, collateral damage. They're training on how to respond if a large-scale collateral damage is caused by an Israeli airstrike. Something like this, collateral damage, possibly, a mosque being hit or a civilian structure being hit, like a school or a church or a mosque. It all seems to kind of, tie back and link in. So with Israel preparing for a war on multiple fronts, basically meaning the Muslim nations that surround it, we have, and in that event, what would most likely happen is Iran is currently building up its bases in in Syria, and Israel is obviously against that because they're seeing that as a threat to the sovereignty of Israel. And should Iran move in artillery such as short-range ballistic missiles or nuclear-capable ballistic missiles, then I think Israel will see that as an unacceptable threat and will launch the attack on Iran in Syria, much as we kind of see in this scene here with the aeroplanes. Perhaps this is collateral damage, and that results in a further attack against Israel, possibly by Iran, but from what I'm seeing, it looks like it may be Russia. Excuse me. It may be Russia, as Russia sends dedicated ship submarine killer frigate to Syria amid rising tensions with the US. So obviously the US and has just imposed sanctions on Russia for cyber attack and for meddling in the US elections. This comes after the UK expelled 23 diplomats, Russian diplomats, from the country for the nerve agent attack on a ex-Russian spy who lived here in Britain. So Russia is deploying a dedicated anti-ship and anti-submarine frigate to Syrian waters as part of a general remobilization of its naval strength in the Mediterranean Sea. The Russian warship, a Krivak II class frigate, was photographed by Bosphorus-based sources in transit from the Black Sea into the eastern Mediterranean, where all reports concur it will join formation with other Russian Navy vessels just off the Syrian coastline. And this all comes, obviously, in the grand scheme of things. If Israel was to attack Iran in Syria and Russia was then to, attack Israel, it would be, likely that America and NATO would then become involved, particularly because America has forces in Syria at the moment, which is why I think Russia have been probing the airspaces of the NATO countries, and they've been, getting into close confrontations with American fighter jets, and they're ready to test their Satan II missile again. So, we're looking at these end times in references to one world governments and one world orders, one world religions, Antichrist 666, Mark of the Beast, the whole shebang. And, they're just putting these kind of things in our face like Satan II, naming these warheads that can carry up to 16, naming these missiles that can carry up to 16 nuclear warheads at a time, things like Satan II. And this is obviously after they just tested their new hypersonic missile, which is called Kinzhal. In NATO language, it's called Dagger. So the Russian military has tested a new air-launched hypersonic missile that reportedly can travel as fast as Mach 10. That's 5 times the speed of sound, over a distance as great as 1,200 miles, all while outmaneuvering anti-ballistic missile systems. And while all that's going on, the UK is preparing itself for a potential nuclear attack by looking at how telecom services would alert citizens in the event of a nuclear attack. So it's kind of going down the route of really the rest of the world. We had something called the Wartime Broadcasting Service, and the message was this country has been attacked with nuclear weapons, communications have been severely disrupted, and the number of casualties and the extent of the damage are yet unknown or not yet known. Stay tuned to this wavelength, stay calm, and stay in your own homes. Remember, there is nothing to be gained by trying to get away. In Japan, they had the false missile alert that went out, which was missile launch. The text message read at 6:02 a.m. a missile was fired from North Korea. Please evacuate to a sturdy building. And that came after the false missile alert in Hawaii, where residents were actually accidentally sent an emergency alert using a system built into the modern smartphones, which caused widespread panic. So there's a lot of preparations going on, and has been going on for the last couple of months. We've been pointing that out. But now things are, taking that kind of next level, where all these leaders in these countries have kind of positioned themselves to respond and react. So China, with Xi Jinping becoming, basically president for life, and in Russia with these displays of all these missiles and stuff just before the elections in Russia, likely Putin is going to remain the president of Russia. You've got North Korea kind of, offering peace talks, but then, remaining completely silent on it, not even announcing it themselves, but, having South Korea announce that instead. Britain with its warships back home, and also at the same time, they're now preparing for a Russian submarine attack. And obviously, in reference to the iPad Go video, we know that there's references to submarines and an attack. And I've mentioned in the previous video how I feel that would also be reflected in the UK, because it appears that after a tsunami-like event, whether that really includes water or it's symbolic for something that is wave-like. So, in the way that they've been talking about these elections that are coming up, for example, in November, they've been calling it this blue wave in reference to the Democrats retaking the House and possibly the Senate as well. So it could be a symbolic tsunami, but I think it may be an actual tsunami. And then we've got references to the submarines coming behind that on the East Coast, and what I'm seeing is on the UK as well, which would make sense because the submarines are coming through the English Channel into the Atlantic Ocean, and obviously the Atlantic Ocean is in the middle of the East Coast and the UK, kind of separate there, but they've got that kind of special relationship, which just reminds me of that, kind of twin system sort of thing. And then kind of the latest news that's been going on that I've just kind of heard about is the depth of these cyber attacks that have been going on. So what I was reading here is the Trump administration accused Russia on Thursday of engineering a series of cyber attacks that targeted American and European nuclear power plants and water and electric systems, and could have sabotaged or shut power plants off at will. United States officials and private security firms saw the attacks as a signal by Moscow that it could disrupt the West's critical facilities in the event of a conflict. They said the strikes accelerated in late 2015, at the same time the Russian interference in the American election was underway. The attackers had successfully compromised some operators in North America and Europe by spring 2017 after President Trump was inaugurated. In the following months, according to a Department of Homeland Security report issued on Thursday, Russian hackers made their way to machines with access to critical control systems at power plants that were not identified. The hackers never went so far as to sabotage or shut down the computer systems that guide the operations of the plants. But still, new computer screenshots released by the Department of Homeland Security on Thursday made it clear that Russian state hackers had the foothold they would have needed to manipulate or shut down power plants. We now have evidence they're sitting on the machines connected to industrial control infrastructure that allow them to effectively turn the power off or effect sabotage. From what we can see, they were there. They have the ability to shut the power off. All that is missing is some political motivation. Now, obviously, that stood out to me because I'm thinking we were talking about EMPs for a good section of time last year, looking at the possibility of an EMP attack delivered by a nuclear missile. And I did a report a while ago in reference to the legislation that changed in reference to a hacking attack. My theory then was that the legislation has changed in terms of if America had deemed that there'd been a cyber attack, they could respond with a nuclear response rather than like tit for tat. They could take it to 11 and respond with a nuclear missile if they had deemed that a cyber attack had happened. And I figured that they'd blame North Korea for the cyber attack as they had been blaming North Korea for the WannaCry attack, which affected the NHS among other things here in the UK. But it seems now that with all the news stories lining up about Russia with their unstoppable missiles and their nuclear drones and their spy ship on the East Coast, and their poisoning ex-Russian diplomats, hacking elections and all that kind of stuff, it seems that Russia is really being set up to take the fall on this one. So obviously I think that all these world leaders are in league with each other, and really for them it doesn't matter kind of if a nuclear war happens or whatever. They prepared themselves with their bunkers and whatnot, so they'll live, and after the dust has settled, essentially they'll rebuild in the image that they want, the one world system, which is where they bring about the Antichrist and the one world religion. So I think it's pretty clear that they're all in league with each other, and the plan is just to use Russia to kind of spur the war on. So while it may start in the Middle East with Israel, Iran and Syria, Russia and America are obviously in Syria as well, and should something kick off between Israel and Iran there, Russia and America are not going to stand idly by. They're going to get involved, and then things just kind of escalate from there in terms of involving NATO countries, because as I mentioned in previous video, Russia also has place nuclear-capable missiles along, the edge of Europe. So, most of Europe is within range anyway, but now they're just even closer. So we'll see what happens. But in reference to, this whole thing being planned and all a setup just to kind of, ignite World War III so that they can bring about their one world system with less people, as instructed by the Georgia Guidestones, bring the population of humanity down to under 500 million, and then it's all like FEMA camps and Mark of the Beast and the chip system, artificial intelligence and all that kind of stuff comes into play. So I just wanted to play this very quickly. I have speeded up the video a little bit so that I can avoid the copyright from the BBC. And this is just kind of one of their scenarios where they show a war kicking off with Russia.
And we've just had a statement in from NATO Central Command. Western forces have used battlefield nuclear weapons against advancing Russian troops in eastern Poland, and have also confirmed the destruction of the Russian city of Kaliningrad, which was a major military center and submarine base. A NATO spokesperson has said that efforts to contain the conflict are ongoing, and that the American and Russian presidents are in direct contact at this time. American B-2 strategic bombers have attacked Russian military bases in Belarus, and B-52 long-range bombers continue to approach Russian sovereign airspace. There are rumours that major Russian cities are being evacuated, and that a national civil defence programme is underway to move citizens to underground shelters and subway systems. In Britain, the Ministry of Defence has said that it continues to monitor the situation very closely, and that all efforts are being made to ensure the safety and security of the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister is said to be gravely concerned about the escalating crisis, but has asked the public to remain calm and to be confident that everything is being done to resolve the situation peacefully. The Archbishop of Canterbury and other senior religious leaders have asked people to come together in prayer at this time of great peril, and to have faith that goodness will prevail over the forces of destruction.
And we've just had more breaking news that thermonuclear bombs of undetermined strength have exploded at NATO regional military headquarters in Brussels and at a major US military and radar base in Wiesbaden in Germany, resulting in the reported destruction of the city of Mainz and the outskirts of Frankfurt.
This is an emergency broadcast from the BBC. Confirmation of a nuclear attack against this country has been received. Please stand by for further information. This is not a test. This is an emergency broadcast from the BBC. Confirmation of a nuclear attack against this country has been received. Please stand by for further information. This is not a test. This is an emergency broadcast.
So that's pretty much how it can happen. The situation here is simulated, it's not real, but that is exactly how it could end up happening. 1 minute you're watching the news about all these things happening, next minute you've got an emergency broadcast on your system saying there's a nuclear attack incoming. Whether it is incoming or not, in terms of a false flag, is irrelevant. That will pretty much tell you at that time that they plan to really blow stuff up. So keep an eye out, because obviously they seem prepared for tsunamis. I've mentioned how they've, Israel's prepared, Britain's prepared. They're prepared for earthquakes, the Great Shakeout. They're prepared for EMP blackout, or at least they're prepared to blame an EMP blackout on North Korea or Russia. They're prepared for submarine attacks. They're currently, kind of battling over the Arctic and its resources there, which obviously we all know that resources, particularly oil, is always a cause for war with these people. So I just wanted to bring all that to your attention and just let you know. Most of you already know anyway, but some of you are skeptical about the events that we're talking about and the possibility of them actually happening. I'll just say, I can't convince you, but I can just show you, what's going on. It's up to you what you want to do with the information, but I'm presenting it to you, and I feel like that's pretty much all I can do to share the information. So you guys have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and God bless.
Transaction approved.
No, they're here already.
Tommy!
Since last night's declaration of martial law, the soldiers are moving in to secure key areas in all major
In response to UN presence in Minneapolis.
Last night I dreamt about how things were.
Of every enemy of the state!
And then I woke up here.